take the best of those and really make it simple. Because again, people's brains just can't digest a lot of information during crisis. And so we wanted to give you something that was very simple. And so what you're looking at is the typical crisis curve when the crisis is extended over time. So what you see happen is sort of that first piece is the event, which is in our case was, I think the United States understanding like COVID is a real issue for us, people having to change how they're working, people's jobs being terminated or businesses being temporarily shuttered. That's, you know, the event. And typically what you see happen with folks is during that initial phase, people are in shock, they're in denial, they're sort of reeling, trying to figure out what it means. And often you'll see sort of heroism. People sort of emerge and say, I can, you know, sort of save the day, and we all sort of rally and want to do our best. And that's something that happens in all of us. And, you know, so a couple of examples is like after 9/11, a really simple thing is everybody put flags out, right? That's an example of heroism. Or after Katrina, we saw people who gave up their livelihood, hopped in a car, went down to the coast, figured out how they could help in tent clinics or with food pantries, things like that. After that first initial rush of, oh my God, what's happening? You know, and people wanting to respond right away, it starts to dawn on people that this is going to stick around for a while, that things aren't going to get back to normal. And that's that emerging reality stage. And sort of the emotions we expect with that. Well, actually, let me step back. That acute phase where you see sort of heroism, the other sort of hallmark of that is people's brains don't work quite right. It's almost like when your phone is looking for Wi-Fi service and it just spins and spins and spins and it wears down the battery. That's sort of what that starts to feel like. People are foggy. Several of you received the video, in fact, about this. I apologize to those of you who registered at the last minute. There was a video we sent out sort of explaining some of these brain pieces. I will send it to you afterwards. Anyway, that's sort of the brain space during that first acute phase. And then when we go into emerging reality, people start to shift the plan, you know, your organizational plans will start to shift towards, you know, how are we going to get through this? We need sort of an interim plan. People start to get a little cranky, understanding that things aren't going to return to normal. You start to see people being more short-tempered, more forgetful, and it often feels like people are sort of dodging bullets. As the crisis goes on, people, you know, just due to exhaustion from it, exhaustion from our brains working differently, exhaustion from sort of riveting from one changing reality to the other and trying to make things work for ourselves and our families and our colleagues and the people we lead and the people we're serving, exhaustion and fatigue sort of set in, and often people will slide into sort of a depressive state. And depression for people can look different. Some people really literally feel depressed. They may be more emotional, they may cry, they may withdraw, they may be paralyzed. As a matter of fact, paralysis is actually something that's common throughout this, but they become more paralyzed. You might see like sort of quit and stay behavior from employees, or some people are sort of fighters. And so they'll come out fighting. In fact, so this is the time in organizations and families when if there are underlying issues that have sort of been bothering people, they come to the forefront. And you tend to see more arguments in organizations. You tend to see, and in fact, we're hearing news reports of this, domestic abuse rates are going up. We saw an incident in Germany recently where somebody opened fire on people who were being too noisy outside their window. You know, clearly that's, those behaviors are more extreme, but it's an example of how it pushes everybody to their edge. And people who are already on the edge are pushed beyond their edge. And so for those of you who are providing mental health services, you may, or services for people who are on the edge already, you may see them move into a space where they're really having a hard time coping, or mental health issues may really come to the forefront. So that's something to keep in mind. As people go, and the other thing I'll add to this is people go through this and organizations go through this at different rates. It depends on where you are in the country, what's happening in your neighborhood, in your community, in your organization. It also depends on sort of your proclivity and other people's proclivity or their sort of neurosis. We all have sort of those things that, those monsters that are our best friends and our monsters. So if you're a people pleaser, that might come to the forefront. You might do things that are maybe not in your best interest because you go to the extreme. But at any rate, as people go through this, then what you see is eventually people reach a state of reconciliation. And this is really when people are grieving the old and letting go of the old and making friends with or accepting what is. Sometimes we're at a stage of reconstruction. And so there's actually reconstruction happening, life is returning to normal, but sometimes not. In Hurricane Katrina and afterwards, that meant people accepting that their homes were never gonna be back. They were never gonna have the home that they had. They may never have the job that they had. In 9/11, that meant accepting different things about how we travel, how we are as people. So there's, but that reconciliation stage is really important. And that's when you tend to see a lot of heavy grieving, bartering, a cycle of denial again. And also, this tends to be where you see more innovation in organizations, which we're going to talk about later. So we wanted to, talk really briefly today a little bit about, where you think you are in your organization is in the crisis curve. In part, just because of it, because we want to sort of hear and be community for each other, but also that's going to help Christina and I really think about what tools are helpful for you. And so I think we'll go around and have everybody share to the degree that you're comfortable, and if you're not, please